One important thing that we want to do is do a good job of caring for those who we are partnering with. So we're not just sending a check off and just and wishing them well. That's very supportive and helpful, but we also want them to know that they haven't been forgotten. Sometimes ministry can be a lonely place because you're giving, and sometimes you don't feel, at least, like you're getting much in return. Well, we want to stand behind those who feel like they're on the field, detached, and way across the world, and help them, remind them that they have been remembered and thought of and cared for. So care packages, letters, things is part of the ways we want to do well, support well for our missionaries. So we're going to pray for everybody. Eventually, we'd like to pray for everybody, relate with everybody, eventually support everybody. But as our means and our resources grow, this is what we'll do. We'll do about half right now. And if you would take a family, and that would just be like once a month, right? Just not like, I mean, you might be able to take this family and just for that month send them a care package. We'll move on to the next family, and then another family will provide a care package, those kinds of things. So anyhow, that's what we're doing globally. And also, we're doing this Diaper Depot as kind of a local expression of mission. So our vision statement is that we'd be a life-giving community, serving those in need and making Jesus the main attraction. So we have chosen to, right now, at least, focus in on people who have babies and people who have little toddlers and supply them with diapers, those who are in need. So we have put the word out there, and people are responding and coming by. Like was mentioned last week, we spent like $700 as a church supplying the need. So there's a big need out there, obviously, and we want to do a good job of maintaining that. So another opportunity for you to jump on board with a local need. If you have some time on Saturday morning, or if you have some additional money that month, you can contribute it to the offering boxes or online, and that will help us as a church, as a congregation, meet a local need. Okay, we want to meet needs globally, and we want to meet needs here in town. This is our mission. This is why we're a church. So I would invite you to ponder some of those opportunities and dive in as you can. Okay, today we're in the book of Job. This is our fourth installment. If you have your Bibles, I'll invite you to grab them now. Like I say every week, I get so much out of these sermons, probably more than you do. I hope not. But every week I study these things and I go, oh my Lord, there's so much good, rich stuff here. So today is our fourth installment. If you'll throw up that slide, this is what we've looked at thus far. Job is 42 chapters long. We're not going to do 42 weeks of Job, but we've done we're going to do 5 weeks. This is our fourth week going through it. The first week we looked at this prologue, which is kind of the narrator who shows up and kind of walks us through what's happening. We, as readers, know more than Job knows. So we got the context, what's happening here. This is a critical section we covered in the first week. Job is going through a test. He doesn't know it, but he's suffering very badly, and we know why he doesn't. Oftentimes, we don't know why we suffer, but there's a larger context to it. That's what that first week told us. The next week, we looked at the dialogues. These were the arguments that he had with his friends, or let's say his friends had with him. And sometimes we get in these back and forths with people. How do we navigate those times? This last week, we looked at this interlude. It's kind of like where the narrator shows back up, and he walks us through the wonders of wisdom, because that's what the crucial theme of this book is all about. We need to understand that God sometimes colors outside of the lines. Why? Why does a person suffer when they don't seem to deserve it? Well, last week helped us understand that sometimes God operates not just justly or fairly, sometimes he operates by wisdom. So we need to be a little bit more flexible than just staying in this rigid line and thinking we have to just do good to get good back. Sometimes we do good and suffer for it. Today we're going to look at the monologues, and these are the 3 long speeches. This is the kind of the final showdown. Okay, this is where God shows up. Okay, so today is going to be really good. Next week, we'll wrap it up with this thing called the epilogue, and the narrator will take us through the sum total, the moral of the story. Okay, so today I want to talk to you about this in this section. I want to talk to you about going through hard times, trying to make it through a trial, a hard time. And we've all had hard seasons of our life that don't make sense. And Winston Churchill said it well. He says, if you're ever going through hell, don't stop. That's the last thing you want to do, right? You just want to give up and just plunk right down there, and that's the last thing you want to do. You want to make it through. So if you're going through hell, don't stop. Keep moving. But how do you do that? I think this section today helps us navigate those times when we are tempted to give up. When we're having a difficult time, we don't know how to do what we're called to do, but God says, keep going. How? And I think there's some practical things that we can derive from this section today. So, in order to make it through your trial, these are the three sections that we're going to look at today. We're not going to read them entirely. I'm going to hit the tops of the mountains. But chapters 29 through 31 show us that human emotion must be processed. Feelings must be handled. We can ignore them. We can stuff them. But no, we got to get them on the table. We need to identify them. We need to acknowledge them. We can't suppress them. We got to be able to talk. We got to be able to write. We got to be able to pray. We need to express our emotions, and sometimes that gets really messy. We don't like to handle our emotions, and sometimes we don't like to sit with others who are handling their emotions. But in order for us to get through a difficult time, we need to process the pain. That's number one. Number two, chapters 32 through 37 show us that ignorant opinion must be endured. Sometimes people say things well-intentioned, but ill-advised. And this whole book is full of that, man. These guys, his friends show up and they want to help, but they're not helping. They think they know, but they don't know. But they're trying to give these answers, and they're just making the water muddy, right? And so sometimes when you're going through difficult things, you have to put up with well-intentioned friends. Number three, chapters 38 through 41 will show us, in order to make it through our trial, that divine perspective must be appreciated. We got to get God's scope. We got to get His take on things. Until that happens, we're not going to make it out. We need to appreciate His perspective. So do these three things. Do these three things, and you will make it through. The men on Friday morning, we have women's get-togethers, and we have men's get-togethers. We call them these Bible discussions. And so it's just a chance for us to relate on a smaller level. And so on Friday mornings, us guys get together, and lately we've been going through the book of Job. That's what we're doing here. We're going through the book of James, another book of wisdom in the Bible, New Testament version of the Proverbs, some say. And in Job chapter 1, a couple weeks ago in study, it said, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet various trials. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." Let steadfastness have its full effect. The last thing you want to do is have a half-baked trial. I mean, you want that thing to cook all the way through. Let it have its full effect. It's like taking a Papa Murphy's. Brendan used to work at Papa Murphy's. You know, if I were to pick up a Papa Murphy's and take it home and just half-bake the thing, it's going to be a disappointment. We're going to get to the table. It's all mushy on the inside. Or if you take like a turkey at Thanksgiving time, and you just half bake the thing, the inside is cold. I mean, that's you do a cake. You know, went over to Ronnie's place. Her birthday was a couple days. Birthday, yeah. And she was cooking stuff and baking things, and I'm sure you didn't half bake your cake, right? You want that thing fully cooked. Sometimes in life, when we're going through problems and trials, God turns up the heat because He's trying to produce something in life. It's called steadfastness. It's called character. And we don't want half-baked character. So we got to make it through the process and trust that God knows what He's trying to accomplish. We might not make sense of it, but God will make good of it if we stay the process. So keep going. You're going to make it. And here's the first step. Human emotion must be processed. So in chapters 29 through 31, we have Job's last speech. Last week we looked at this great poem on wisdom. The narrator shows back up, but starting in chapter 29, Job resumes his speech. And this time it's not a dialogue, it's a monologue. It's just him talking. It's his last, final speech. 3 chapters long. And in it, he is processing his emotions. And when you're going through pain, there's a lot of feelings that are associated, right? And so in order for you to get through your trial, you need to be able to process the pain. You need to be able to talk. You need to be able to write. You need to be able to cry. You need to be able to scream and rail at God if you need to. But that's a part of the process. So chapter 29, he just gets into this kind of this wistful, nostalgic attitude. Oh, longing for the good old days. And which really, nostalgia is really believing that the past is better than it was. Oh, the good old days. It wasn't that good. But it deepens your sense of loss, right? You've lost something, and so you're wistful about the past and making it better really than it was. And so that's what we're prone to do when we're going through pain. Chapter 30, he gets into this attitude of everything and everybody is against me. And let me remind you that feelings don't have to be right or wrong to be real. Sometimes we spout off things that don't sound right. And we try to correct each other because that's not right. You got to think better. No, the person's just processing emotions. So even if their feeling's not right, it's a feeling. And you need to be able to get it on the table and talk about it. Chapter 31, he talks about his adamant insistence on his innocence. He's innocent. He is righteous. And all of his friends are saying, hey, well, either you're not righteous or God is not just, because God would never do that to somebody who didn't deserve it. They didn't know it. And he says, well, God must not be just then because I'm righteous. That's what he says in chapter 31. I'm innocent. And he's adamant about declaring his innocence. So Job is processing his feelings, and God doesn't shut him down. This is something we got to get, because the Bible is full of these feelings. You go through the Psalms, and these guys are angry. They're mad. They're vindictive. They're jealous. Sometimes they even express hate in their prayers. But the good thing is that if whatever you're feeling, it can be prayed. And God will accept it. You can feel jealous. If you feel jealous, pray your jealousy. If you feel hate, pray your hate. If you feel bitter, pray your bitterness. That's constructive. If you just try to stuff it, that's very destructive, toxic. It'll burn a hole in your soul. You got to get it out. You got to open a window. You got to ventilate the apartment. Sometimes the air gets so toxic because you're not talking. You're not expressing. It's important. Job teaches us this. The book of Psalms teaches this. So if that means writing or journaling, that's a great way to do it. Random thoughts, feelings, toxic moments, write it down, get it down. Maybe that's talking to a trusted friend. Maybe it's talking to a therapist. Maybe it's praying. Certainly it's praying. Having it out with God. Scream and rail at God if that's what it takes to get that feeling on the table. I think a big thing is creating art. Destiny, if you wouldn't mind, coming on up here. Destiny, if you haven't met her, you need to sometime. She is a great young lady who has a gift of making poetry. And if you haven't seen, she has written a book. Come on, somebody. Yeah. She's written a book. I got it off Amazon. It's a bunch of her poems and stuff. So I've asked her, why don't you come on up here. Stand by me for a second here. I've asked her to recite one of her poems, and she did me one better. She wrote one for this occasion. So I said, hey, we're looking at Job 29 through 31, and she took those 3 chapters, and she tried to parallel something, what Job was doing, but used her own words and used her own pain. And I want to use this as an example of one of the things that we can do constructively to process our pain is to create art. A lot of the greatest pieces of art in life, man, has been produced by somebody's pain, whether it be music, whether it be a painting, whether it be a poem, whether it be a speech. If you're able to translate your pain into art, you have created beauty out of ashes. So I want to use Destiny as an example, and if you would do your poem for us, and this is just an example of many things that we can do to turn our pain into art.
Hello. Thank you for that plug, I guess. All right, here we go. The perception I had of my childhood when I was young was good, fantastic even. Dance school, recitals were my favorite. Soccer, Bible study, choir, after-school programs. I was always fed and well-dressed, and my hair was always done. I was living the life. What more could I ask for? I saw only good then. But as an adult, I now see that I was blissfully unaware of the manipulation that was taking place. See, I couldn't seem to escape the wicked witch of the West, and everyone who lives in her world is her flying monkey. Well, everyone except me. And I didn't know how to navigate her world as Dorothy, especially because she thinks I killed something she holds dear. And all I saw in her was home. God, you shielded me from the darkness. I only saw the lighted path, and somehow I knew it would always lead to blessings, so I followed it. The older I grew, the narrower the path became, thus the more treacherous and tumultuous. However, it was still well lit, so I held on to faith, thinking, no, knowing that better would be on the other side. But it seemed that things were becoming more difficult. Maybe it was because I could see the darkness now. I began to feel lonely because no one around me knew God like I knew him. So they questioned why I was leaving them behind for a God who allowed me to be sick and go through so much pain. And you know what? I started to question too. But that mindset didn't last long. I started thinking, who am I that I should only receive good from the Lord? But Father, is this the life filled with so much pain? Is this what you want for me? It seems like I am on a path to destruction. And if I am to believe that you are the way maker, Jehovah Jireh, my portion, well, why do I feel like the serving size placed in front of me had me wanting more? Then I got more, but it wasn't the good stuff. I had to spit it out. But I was left with the aftertaste stuck in my mouth. I need a palate cleanser. My blessing is coming, right? Right? I love you. All All I'm saying is, when is the blessing coming? I've been waiting for so long. It seems like it's so far off, always just out of reach. In these moments, I must ask, God, are you testing my faith or my wisdom? Please help me understand these tough times. You must be having whispered conversations with the devourer because it really feels like you said, have you considered my servant Destiny? Do all you want to her. Take her health, her home, separate her from her family, poke a hole in her health. Check, 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 and check. But the fact that I almost stepped on a needle full of heroin when I can't even remember the last time I took an Advil made me think, almost doesn't count. You must have screamed at him, don't touch her soul. Don't take her life. See, the devil thought he had me, but God, you rescued me. It is your love, grace, and mercy that keeps me on the lighted path. And when I feel like I cannot find planter placement on this precarious path, you carry me. You can test my faith all you like, because if I keep you close, I have nothing to fear.
Beautiful. Spend some time and meditate, ruminate, think, create, put it together, create art. It's a great way to process through the pain. There's some real stuff there. She's been going through some stuff. So she can either stuff it, don't ever talk about it, or she can get it on the table and inspect it and to observe it. The title of the series is called A Grief Observed. And if we don't observe the grief and bring trusted people into the room to observe the grief with us, then it becomes a very destructive, toxic emotion that doesn't do us any good. So create art is a great way to process through the pain. And that's what the book of Job is. It's one large poem. One of the most creative and artistic expressions we have in the Bible. Should throw up that next slide. Lately, I've been going through this book called Prayer, called Prayer, 40 Days of Practice by Justin McRoberts and Scott Erickson. It's a nice little volume. It's full of images and short little just to reflect upon. And I would invite you to look at this one here. This is one of the entries that I just read the other day. It says, may I learn to make good out of what I'm given, rather than only make sense of it. Sometimes we're not going to make sense of what we're going through, the pain we're facing. Why? We might not ever be answered that question. But even though we can't make sense of it, we can make good of it. This guy's been given a storm cloud, thunderclouds, thunderbolts, rain, and positioned and postured his life to be able to receive a blessing and make good of the gift. Suffering can be a gift if you allow it to be a gift. First, though, it needs to be processed. Number 2. So human emotion must be processed. Number 2 is ignorant opinion must be endured. I wish it wasn't so, but it's inevitable. So we see Elihu show up. This new friend. We know about 3 of the friends, but we've never seen this guy before. All right, he's been like silent the whole time, kind of like a fly on the wall, observing the whole thing. And now, as a young whippersnapper, he thinks he has it all figured out. He's listened to the whole thing. Nobody's got it right so far, so he's going to wax eloquent and let everybody know what things should be. So he holds stage for 6 chapters. That's a long speech. This dude is long-winded. And so he's witty, kind of brash. He's kind of like a late-night talk show host, kind of like Jim or Jon Stewart, Trevor Noah. These guys who don't really bring a lot of clarity to the issues, but they bring a lot of ridicule. They know how to pour it on and make it sound ridiculous. And this is kind of what he's doing here. He's he's satire. He's bringing a lot of ridicule to the situation, and he basically just says, Job, you're being self-righteous. You think you're being innocent here, but all you're being is self-righteous, and maybe you're not suffering for something in your past, like these guys have said, but perhaps you're suffering for something that you will do in the future. Because God is just, and you wouldn't be going through this thing if there is not a reason. So God, in His infinite wisdom, He knows something that's happening in your future, and so that's why you're going through this. Does Elihu know this? He doesn't know this. Unfortunately, people's ignorant opinions must be endured. Well-intentioned, ill-advised. One time my wife suffered a miscarriage. And somebody came up afterwards. This a great person. We love this person, but they came up and said, well, if you were to have everybody stand up in church, all the women, one out of every 5 women would raise their hands, and a lot of women have gone through this. The person was trying to be helpful, but it didn't help. All my wife wanted really at the time was a hug. She didn't want that kind of advice. Maybe you're diagnosed with a serious diagnosis, a serious disease, and somebody says or speculates maybe it's your lifestyle that's caught up with you. Maybe you haven't been taking care of yourself. Maybe that's why you're going through this. Just trying to be helpful. Or your prayers have gone answered, and so they say perhaps there could be unconfessed sin in your life. Have you considered that? You've probably experienced this in your life, right? People are trying to be helpful, and really it's just making the situation worse. But it must be endured. What else are you going to do? So here's my encouragement. Just because you have an opinion doesn't mean it needs to be expressed. It's a big one. Because sometimes we come off to be Job's friends. We come in and we're trying to be helpful and try not to be helpful. Just try to be present. Try to sit down with a person and be with them. Weep with those who weep. Right? Sometimes we jump to conclusions, think we got it all figured out. When we don't, we think we got the person figured out. When we don't, we think we got the problem figured out. When we don't. So exercise a little humility and suspend judgment. Try not to figure it all out. Just be with partial information, partial knowledge, and just be with a person in their pain. That's all you need to do. H.L. Mencken once said, for every complex problem, there is a solution that is simple, neat, and wrong. Problems are complex. People are complex. Stories are complex. Sit with them in the complexity. Don't try to iron it out. Don't try to answer the questions. James tells us to be quick to hear, slow to speak. If he were here today advising us in this social media context that we find ourselves in, I think he'd say be quick to do your research, slow to post, slow to repost, slow to make conclusions. Don't be so quick with vindications and pronouncements. People won't always do that, though. So we must be able to endure, hang with it. It's well-meaning people saying some unhelpful things. And if that happens to you, try to be gracious. Just try. I think this is speculation on my part, But why did Elihu do this long speech, 6 chapters long? I think it's because Job came down to the end of his rope and says, hey, man, I'm not going to interrupt anymore. And I'm not going to spend my time trying to defend myself. And so he just let Elihu go on. Whereas before, he was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I think after a while, you'll come down to a point where you're just like tenderized. Okay. And you just allow people to offer the opinions they might have. And you just take it graciously and know that God is going to take care of you. When we're done defending ourselves, we are the most ready to hear from God. That's an important point. When we're done defending ourselves, we are most ready to hear from God. And Job does. This is the next point. Chapters 38 through 41 teaches that divine perspective must be appreciated. And Job gets it. He gets God shows up. He shows up when he stops talking, when he stops interrupting, stops defending himself. God shows up and gives him a larger perspective. When we go through pain, sometimes that's all we see. When you're navel-gazing, looking at your own situation, you're just absorbed in the trauma, it can become bigger than life. But when you look up and get a bigger perspective, you find out that your problem has perspective and context, and it makes it smaller and more manageable, but only happens when God gives you His perspective. And that's what we desperately need when we're going through trauma and pain and trying to heal. We need God's thoughts. So God shows up here, chapter 38, my favorite chapter of the entire book of Job. Chapter 38, God shows up, and He breaks the silence by asking questions. Question after question after question. He asks over 70 unanswerable questions. You think He would come and answer Job's questions. He doesn't answer one. He just has his own list of questions. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Boom, 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 boom. 70s. And after a while, it's just like an avalanche of questions. Wow. Not to intimidate Job so much as, although I think, putting Job in his place a little bit, I think that was part of it. We saw last week that the fear of God is wisdom. So I think he's reinstilling a little bit of this fear in Job. But not so much to intimidate, but to disclose the inexplicable wonders of God's workings in the world. He takes Job on a virtual tour of the universe. I mean, whoa! Have you ever been to Disneyland? You know that what do they call that? What is it? Soaring around the world. And you sit in this what is it called? Like a hang glider kind of thing. You sit in there, and it's a virtual tour. And you go around all the wonders of the world, and it's just, wow. Whoo! It's just like awe-inspiring. And it's just like, man, that's exactly what God takes Job on. It's a virtual, soaring around the world, virtual tour. Takes him through the expanse of the earth and sea, the dwelling of light, the place of darkness, the gates of death, the storehouse of the snow, hail, wind, rain, ice, clouds, thunder, and lightning. He takes him into the desert. He brings him into the constellations of the stars. He takes him into the human mind. He takes him through the animal kingdom. And he introduces him to these two monsters of chaos called Behemoth and Leviathan. And he says, if you think these guys are awesome, you haven't seen anything yet. This is God's way of saying, I control every square inch of the universe. And Job, would you like to have a chance of running the world for a day? Sometimes I think when we go through suffering, we get this noble victim complex. Kind of smug, sitting back, and we almost relish the thing that I'm suffering. And you ought to do this and this for me. And so sometimes I think God needs to show up and say, there's something bigger going on here. I'm running the universe by my wisdom. And look at Job's response. Chapter 40, verse 4, Job says, I am of small account. What shall I say? I lay my hand over my mouth. I have spoken once, and I will not answer twice, but I will proceed no further. Essentially says, I think I'll be quiet now. I think I'll shut up. Ecclesiastes 5:2 says, God is in heaven, and you are on earth. Therefore, let your words be few. Take your place. God's in control. Sometimes, I don't know if you've ever looked at, this is not so popular anymore, but back when I was a kid, there was these cross-stitch circles that my grandma used to stretch cloth over and then start to cross-stitch. And then the bottom side is all like ragged and tangled, you know. And then the top side is like this beautiful tapestry. And sometimes in life, I think it's like looking on the bottom, the underside of this tapestry. It's all gnarled and tangled and bad and disgusting. And we're like, why am I having to go through this disgusting thing in my life? I don't like it. And yet God is weaving a tapestry on the top side that we don't get to see until we get His perspective on things. And we go through suffering and pain and trauma and tragedy. Why? God knows. God's in control. And He's orchestrating everything out for your good. He's in total control. And He knows what He's doing. And He's acting on your behalf. And so we need to get the top side perspective and believe that God is working it all out for our good. Romans 8:28. So He raises Job's vision, broadens his perspective. And next week we'll see that he made it through a better man. And you're going to make it through. Do you hear me, church? You're going to make it through. A better, more complete person who loves God and trusts in His purposes. You're going to be broadened. You're going to be enlarged. You're going to be made deeper, richer, and better. This is what God does. And He uses adversity to accomplish His purposes. So let steadfastness have its full effect. Process your emotions. Endure the noise. And look to God. Get His perspective. One of the ways we do that is be in this book. It's impossible to make it through. The steadfastness is not going to have its full effect if you're not in His Word, church. Open up the Bible. Turn down the noise and open up the Bible and get His perspective. He'll give it to you. And then I would say also to turn your eyes to the cross. Turn your eyes to this book. Turn your eyes to this cross, and He will enlarge your world. In Isaiah 53, it says, He was wounded for our transgressions. We might feel wounded, but He was wounded. We might feel bruised, but He was bruised for our iniquities. We might feel chastised, but He was chastised for our peace. And with His stripes, we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and God hath laid upon him the iniquity of us all. That's a great way to broaden your perspective on your suffering. Put it in context with the suffering of Jesus Christ for each one of us. He bore it all. And I might have to bear a cross in my life, but I'm so glad I didn't have to bear his. He bore it all for all of us. I'm going to ask the music team to come back up. If you're going through a trial today, I would love for this message to be an encouragement to you. You're going to make it through. You're going to make it through. God is with you. He has not left you. He's not forsaken you. He didn't leave Job, although Job didn't know he was there. God was there all the while. He set the whole thing in motion. Nothing is going to get to you that hasn't gone through God first. He's bringing into your life by great design because he wants to make something of you that he couldn't do it without the suffering. Trust him. The suffering's not going to take you out. Jesus is going to stay by your side all the way. So keep on moving through. I'm going to invite you to stand to your feet. I'm going to close with a word of prayer. We're going to sing one last song. It's hard, Lord, sometimes to go through our sufferings. But give us hope, God. From a message like this, from a book like Job, give us hope. Remind us that you're there and you're in total control. You're orchestrating everything for our good. So help us acknowledge our pain. Help us to get it on the table and talk and sing and pray and write and journal and do whatever we need to do to process, to work through the pain. Help us to endure friends that are well-intentioned, with grace, with humility. Help us not just defend ourselves. Help us look to you and get the perspective that you have for us, God. I trust that you're going to move in each and every one of these people in their lives today, God, encouraging them, reminding them, helping them. Look up, because you are good and you are in total control. So we're going to trust you.